Wesley Shultz, the Lumineers. Thanks for joining us, man.
Absolutely. Good to be with you.
You know, when you have a band, any band out there, but when you have a band like the Lumineers that dominates, and when I say dominates, I mean, you sell out arenas, you headline festivals, you open up for U2. It's reflective of a song catalog that resonates with fans. So take me through your thought process in creating Brightside and the pressure of that expectation.
Yeah, there's a guy from Motorhead, Lemmy. He said, if you think you got what it takes, fly your flag and see who salutes. And so I feel like I don't think of it as dominating so at all. I think of it more like resonating. It somehow strikes a chord with people in a way that, you know, some albums you get help from a radio station will play your music more and sometimes less. But if music finds a way, that's really special. You know what I mean? And so I think with Brightside, we were taking our own version of risk by not making it at all in the same way we had made our previous records. We had just, you know, most people have a smartphone, and on that it has voice memos of some sort. And that's all we had going into the studio, was just these really crude versions of demos on these voice memos. And in the past, we showed up and we had a whole Pro Tools session, you know, where you put drums in and bass, piano and guitar, vocal. You can do all these things. So for us, just coming in kind of like improvisationally was a lot. It gave the album a much different feel, and it's something I think we both needed to do it that way, in a way to like be back on your heels a little bit and not quite know what you're doing.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because from a fan perspective, I mean, you kind of hit on this as well. You know, the Lumineers, Cleopatra 3, they could almost be like one album where they all just mesh together. But that theory comes to a screeching halt on Brightside.
Yeah, in some ways, I feel like it's like an evolution, because if you listen to 3 and then you listen back to the first album, they're very different. But if it's a slow kind of time-lapse evolution, it feels natural. I'm sort of proud of that, because I want there to be less of a contrived, we're going to change, and more like, this is what we're really into. You know, on the most recent album, Brightside, you hear a lot more of Jer's drumming. He's always been able to drum. It's not like he got lessons between albums or something. He's always known what he's doing, but he was always serving the song in this really kind of beautiful, humble way. And for me, lyrically, it's really different, because I was always, I think, really intent on trying to tell a very linear story, you know, almost rooted in some of the folk music or that type of, what's the word, mentality going into telling a story. And these are stories, but they're more like a feeling. And you don't really know what I'm saying exactly, but hopefully we all feel the same way when we hear it. And you know, a formative thing that happened to me, I was a sophomore in high school, however old you are. And I went and saw Neil Young play solo at this theater. And it blew my mind. You know, I'd seen bands, and I had never seen anything like that. And I realized that he was of the same ilk as like a Kurt Cobain, which was like everything at that age, you know. The way they wrote was so much less about did you get what happened in the story, and more about you feel something primal and visceral. And that's for me, that was a different way to write, because I feel like I sort of gave myself outs or an alibi saying, well, if they don't get it, they don't get the story. You know, instead of, it's weird. It's like you're taking on a different kind of thing when you're saying they don't feel what I feel. You know, it's like, it's elusive. So those guys were, Neil Young is still the master of that, and Kurt was an incredible savant at it. But I always felt like fascinated by that idea that you didn't have to tell such a linear thing, and I maybe never approached it a whole lot. We have a few songs that we've done it with, but this was like a whole album of that, where you don't really know quite what's happening, but you kind of know how we're feeling when we're singing it.
You mean in the
feeling
sense that,
and the sort of currency that's coming through on this particular album that you're doing is a little bit sort of more immediate and sort of cathartic than the earlier ones. Is that what you mean?
It's definitely more immediate, but not necessarily by intention. I think we realized that by expressing a feeling, we just realized that playing live and playing the album for our friends, all of a sudden they were immediately pulled into the record. And the other ones, you almost had to know more about it before you fully were with it, you know?
Yeah.
You know, there's a song by the Raconteurs about a milkman. Man, I have to get the name. He's like, just blame it on the milk, man. That's how the song ends. But it's a whole story. The whole song is this beautiful story, and you're trying to figure out what happened, and it's a work of art. But that's different than Keep on Rocking in the Free World or Sugar Mountain or something like that, where you don't even know what the hell he's talking about sometimes. You just you feel. And I think we just went into it thinking, the album thinking like, well, we weren't supposed to be making in quotes, we weren't supposed to be making a record right now. So this is all icing on the cake. We just got kicked off of our tour via COVID. So let's just do something with our time, and let's try something a little more spontaneous. And then that's the result. But again, I think it's like we set ourselves up to do something like that, but we weren't really, it wasn't so planned out. And I think that's what the essence that comes across in the same way that on our second album we had Angela, and our third album we had Jimmy Sparks, and both of those were not planned songs. Those were very, you know, half-baked ideas that became songs, and I think they have a different energy on the record because of that. So it's a funny alchemy, you know, like anything. It's not like the conditions were right and then we were ready to do it. I don't think we probably could have done this on our first or second record. We weren't really confident in our ideas, you know, kind of suspicious of them actually.
So you guys kind of really like in the past, really hone the ideas together, and it takes a while. And then when you go live, it sort of turns into another beast. But you guys have always sort of had that sort of transcending element with your crowd, where the crowd is really sort of resonating, whereas this album's just flowed out kind of like that from the get-go. Yeah,
it's weird. It wasn't written to be played live, but it's been really fun to play it live. In other words, sometimes you write a song like AM radio, and then you go, that's going to be pretty fun. I can already tell. Yeah. Before we ever played it for people, I said that probably will close out shows at some point. That will, when it's around a year or two, you could end a show with that song. It has some sort of climax to it or finality, epicness to it that like Stubborn Love had, things like that. But in the moment, if you press and try to do that stuff, it's not going to really work out in your favor. So it's more like you have blinders on, and then you look at it after you're done and you say, oh, cool. That's
kind of see it as someone else, and sort of be a little bit more objective about what you've just done and sort of peel it backwards.
Yeah, because you're trying to piece together.
For me, when I heard your album, I was listening to the whole thing, and the one that popped out for me was Birthday Song. I don't know why. That one just immediately just popped straight out, and I was just like, I have to keep listening to this song. Is there anybody else that you've shown that track to and the whole album that they've said similar things?
Yeah, my brother said the same thing, which really surprised me, because my brother's the first person who said something I knew was the truth to me early on. You know, he was kind of like, he never said much. And then I played him Flowers in Your Hair in Scotland. These were these two early songs that we were making. And he's like, I think you're onto something. Like, he had never said I wasn't before, because he was a good brother. But and with this, I kind of thought he would. Well, first of all, I think saying birthday in any song is sort of radioactive in theory. You're just like, it's not a good idea. And that's part of the allure. It's like a comic that wants to tell a joke about something you're not supposed to tell a joke about. Where
it's the same thing I thought when I heard the words. I was thinking birthday songs. You can't really take it seriously, but I was loving it. I was driving, absolutely loving it, because of how different it was coming across.
McCartney's done it. Springsteen's done it.
Yeah. I mean, those are legends, you know. It's like I think when we when we started writing that, Jared sent me this voice memo. He was in Italy. He had just moved there, but they couldn't move into their place. So they're living with the in-laws, and he's just kind of losing his mind. And he sent me this really desperate sounding voice memo. It was like, it's all right, it's all right, it's all right, it's your birthday. And I'm like, what's going on in Italy right now? Like, is he all right? And also, why did you say it that way? Why did you say it's all right? And just the whole thing really, it was arresting, you know, it was captivating. And then I thought to myself, well, you know, the only way we can really make this make sense and be like compelling is it has to have these verses that are feeling very sad and melancholy. And then it explodes into this, all right, we're doing this, we're having your birthday, regardless if the house just burned down or whatever the circumstances are, we're going to do this. And it kind of felt like, in a funny way, you know, during the pandemic, there were babies being born, there was still weddings occasionally, there was celebrations in different ways. People were trying to have some semblance of joy and community without it being in its full form. And it felt like that song was like a part of that feeling. You know, like we do these rituals, but the rituals feel different under different circumstances. So the birthday really fit in with that vibe. And I remember even just how the song kind of resets itself at the end. We would never have done that. We would be too self-conscious in the past. And we were like, this is great, man. Let's do it. Like, you know, wind it up, tune it up a half step. Let's have some fun with this instead of, I guess, overanalyzing. You know, there's a level of OCD that took place in our music previous 3 albums that was a controlling factor, that it was nice to shed some of that and just feel like curious and like not self-conscious about it.
Are you able to let go of the reins a little bit after doing a few albums? Things tend to flow a little easier.
For sure, yeah. I mean, that's the Hold On Loosely song, you know, it's like
38 Special, baby.
Like, yeah, it's like, it pretty much is that. It's the same with, you know, dating. It's the same with everything. You know, you kind of have to like let go and just try to be you and let it come to you. And unfortunately, and fortunately for us, we were enough of making songs that were like, we had our freedom behind closed doors. You know, when we were writing, you have to kind of hypnotize yourself and you're free in that moment. But then the editor comes out and just kind of chops it up. And I think the editor got a little downgraded now. And it was more like, we were seeing much more of a big picture, like accepting of a lot of our sort of tendencies and flaws and just saying, let's do that. That's cool. And I think there's a lot of benefit to a lot of bands on their second, third, fourth records, where you see this other side of them that was always there, but maybe just because of something that was in their head or how they perceived everything, whatever it was, they were constricting themselves or putting a governor on themselves that they didn't really need. That you see something joyous like this more come out.
Wesley, I think also instrumentally, we hear a little more electric guitar from you, a little more power driven chords rather than, am I accurate on that?
Yeah, we had the song that starts off the album was basically the first song we finished, Brightside, which became the title track. And that was one of those Gretsch White Falcons, you know, Neil Young made his own signature sound with. And like Simon Felice, our producer, just had it sitting in the studio. He's a huge Neil Young fan. In fact, him and his brothers dressed up as a bunch of nuns for Halloween and were Neil Nunn they like played a whole show and all these Neil Young covers. But so he's always been really enamored with him, and so have I. But basically, was that Jim laughing?
Yeah, we got Jim to laugh.
Sorry, but I didn't realize I was on mute. Wasn't on mute.
Neil
That's
Nunn,
creative
man. But yeah, basically, Simon had bought this guitar because he saw a picture of Neil with his white suit and his white Falcon, and he had it in the studio. And I had never touched it. I was like, that's not gonna fit most of what we're doing in the past. And then Jer laid down this drum beat this is sort of where the beautiful like reactionary stuff happens, where I had this bad voice memo that I was going jin 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 on like acoustic guitar and singing over that. And then Jared went do 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 da 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 do, and did that on the drums, and it kind of was a okay. He's now doing what I was doing, so now I have to do something else. Otherwise, it's just redundant and it just steps on each other. And then that guitar was sitting there, and I was like, "Can I try that?" And it was these big open, you know, what I think of when I think of Neil Young and certain people that play, where there's the space to play it that way. You know what I mean? And by Jared playing the drums that way, it left me space to do it in a more sparse way and like open and more expansive. So that kind of stuff, like electric guitar is all over the record because we were just like kids with a new toy, you know, like, oh, let's put it on something else. Check this out. You know, on Birthday Song, when the it's on a classic guitar, and when the hook drops down, there's these big kind of single note hits on an electric guitar. So even on songs where you might not realize it.
What about Never Really Mind? There's a, is that on there too?
That's a Telecaster. So that's like our Bruce Springsteen homage, you know, like
State Trooper, or
like just in general. I mean, you know, he made that Telecaster so much of his sound. And I think growing up, I have vivid memories of just sitting on my, like, my mom had a little playroom, she called it, and it was a rug, and it had all this like Play-Doh stuck in it from all the times we would be playing in this room. And I remember like picking out the Play-Doh, laying on the floor, and Bruce Springsteen's playing on a tape in the room, and I thought he was like 80. I was like, who's this old guy? You know, and then I looked at the picture, and it's this young guy, and he's singing about all this, you know, the stuff down the Jersey Shore and other things, and it just felt like our state storyteller, you know. And
have you ever met him?
No, I haven't met him. I'm dying. I would love to meet him. Like, hopefully one day not too far from now. I went and saw him on Broadway, though, and that was like, I felt like I had met him because it was so intimate, you know. And it was just him for most of the show. But yeah, basically Never Really Mind. We just we searched around for guitars. It wasn't like I want to make this on a telly, but again, like that just fit. And there was not, it was more like, does this sound cool? Does this sound badass? Not, is this going to sound too much like Bruce Springsteen or something? Like there was not that self-consciousness, which I think allowed it to be what it was. Just like the Beatles, there's a very Beatles bass being played on a Beatles bass on a Birthday, that, you know, you just kind of say, well, that's what I love. Let's do this. And I think embracing that was big for us, in terms of like just being a little more free. It's like those improv classes where they ask you to yell bizarre things at each other, or, you know, it's kind of like shedding your own inner critic and just exploring
Like
a little bit.
Primal therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. Just start screaming at each other.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how, like, if you pick up a different instrument with a different sound, or use a different pedal or a different guitar, how that alone can spark a completely different sort of energy with the creative process alone.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, with Brightside especially, and even just having Jer playing drums the way he was playing them, all of a sudden that made me feel like I had never heard that before in my life, you know. And I picked up this guitar, and it was like, I truly felt like I was in somebody's garage at band rehearsal, and we all showed up and we didn't know what we were going to do that day. And then it's like, check this out. He's got an amp. We got an amp. We got a guitar. Like, it's so innocent in a beautiful way that I think that's where a lot of the best ideas begin with, is just like, there is no editor. There is no critic, you know, it's just like, it's as if I was telling my friends, like, it felt like, and this isn't in any way like in an arrogant way. It was just more like, I've been playing guitar since I was 16. So it's like 23 years, something like that. And, but it felt like playing these new instruments. It was like when Neo takes the pill and then he knows Kung Fu. It was like, I was like looking down on my hands as if I was doing something miraculous, but I'm just playing normal chords, but I'm like, holy shit, can you believe this? Like, listen to the sound. And they're in the sound room, the like listening back on the monitors, and like, dude, this is great. Like, everybody's in this feeling of wonderment that is contagious. And I think that made it onto the record, in a way that we would have kind of wasted that had we done that all in a demo back in Denver, and then months later going out to the East Coast to record. I think that there's a
You captured
urgency to that. Yeah.
Do you think that this
Yeah.
is a sign of things to come now with the Lumineers?
I mean, I would love to make another record this way, or any record we could. I also just think it's part of it's like, we didn't set out to do it this way strictly, and we didn't set out to make a movie concept record, the last record. So it's kind of like being open to what's happening. But I think it's a way better approach. And time was flying by in the studio. It used to be like, what time is it? Not in a bad way, but you're just so pouring over everything. And this was more like, it felt like you were a passenger on this train that was moving really fast, and it was just exciting.
So no Rogue fans are going to get an axe out and halfway through the Lumineers gone electric and take an axe to the mixing desk because they're not folk enough anymore.
I know, right? I don't really know, honestly. Like, I don't know what that even means anymore, like folk or Americana.
Yeah,
I think it has a lot more to do with something about the surface look of a band than necessarily what they're even singing about. A white guy with an acoustic is probably a folk singer to most people. It's just how it is. But I think at the same time, you know, it's nice to stretch an audience, because it means that we're entertained and we're going to put on a show because we're really enamored with something, and not, there are certain bands that they love a sound and they'll do that sound forever. And I think if that's what makes them tick, it's beautiful, more power to you. For me, it was nice to go in these subtle different directions. You know, hearing Jared play so many more drum beats on this record, or drums at all, using those electric guitars, even just like singing in different ways, you know, lyrics that were way less linear. All this stuff like added up to something more exciting to us. And it wasn't in a, I'm bored, I'm so good at this, let's do something else. But it was something where it's like, I think I've sang that song before. I think I've played that before. Let's do something else that's like not quite, it's like shaky ground. You're not quite sure how the sentence is going to end.
Do you think that happens with your songs when they go, say, from bedroom to studio, then from studio to live stadium, and then to anthemic status? Do you feel sort of like the weight of the maturity of the song as you grow with it upon you when you're on that sort of journey with your own song? Like the song itself has evolved and matured so much that you've got this sort of mantle to sort of keep up with it, like when you're on tour? Like the song has a life of its own?
I think the songs definitely do that. We got taught that early, you know, with like Ho Hey was like a breakup song, and then it became like a wedding anthem, which makes no sense, but it's just like, that's,
people don't know.
Wes, that's your Born in the USA.
Yeah, exactly. That was a protest song. So, but I
get
think
married to it. Or
like,
get married to it, whatever you want.
It's weird, man. But like something like, I remember we were opening for U2, and one of the highlights of the show when we would open for us, like our moment, was to play Slow It Down, because it's just like mostly solo with drums that join later that are very sparse, but it's just two guys on stage in a stadium, and it's either like you're gonna leave or you're gonna lean in. And that song over time has taken on a whole lot of weight and meaning that we didn't really feel in the moment. Like I got my Easy Pass stolen. Someone smashed my window and took my Easy Pass, and I was living in Brooklyn, and I was just not doing well. And no one was like, there's a line in it about asking for a cigarette, you know, and I remember asking a girl for a cigarette outside of a bar, and she's like, no, I don't know you. And I'm like, I'll give you $1, like I'll pay you. What she's like, she just walked away. And I was like, this city is cold, man. Like, and I came to Denver, is much different, but a lot of it was like about these sort of seemingly trivial things that became like whatever we were spewing, like whatever was coming out of us was also like, there was an honesty to it, or like something about it that was elusive, that like takes on a role. So I think part of it is like, with this album, it's a lot more of the they're like riddles or like vignettes, or they're not trying to say this happened and this happened and then this was the end. It's more like it's more like, hey, do you feel what I feel? And have I communicated that both like in its vibe? You know, listening to Talking Heads, let's say growing up, my dad like raised me on the Talking Heads. It was like Cars, Talking Heads, Leonard Cohen, and Billy Joel. Those were like the
Dark
big
Side
four.
of the Moon.
A little bit, but like with something like Talking Heads, he always said, David Byrne said, it hits your body first, and then your mind processes it later. And I think certain, like our last album was way more probably about it hitting your intellectual side, and then your body almost feels it later. This is more like, I think it's more immediate because it does hit your body first. There's something more primal about it, and then the rest of it follows. And if you want to excavate down, there's some things to find in there, hopefully lyrically, but it's a different approach. And I've like always admired these people that found a way to do that, because it is like a strange mystical thing to be able to like bring someone on the same page as you by just almost talking around it, you know, like singing around it, playing around it.
John Lennon once said that, referring to jazz, he was like, I just can't get into jazz. It's too sort of intellectual. He goes, but rock and roll really kicks you in the guts.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's like it, and it's funny because like watching the Beatles doc, John Lennon, the way he sings, and then you look at how Paul sings, I relate way more to John, because John has like he has this thing, this break in his voice, and when you hit it,
shredded asphalt voice.
Yeah, when you hit that, there's some. It's like the moment the sun sets and there's some green spark, you know, like they talk about. I forget what that is, or like
the green flash.
It's like there's something happening there. And then Paul was more like, he could use his voice like a chameleon, like an instrument. He could almost put pedals on it, you know, it was like he just knew how to use it in such a more advanced way. And John was like a kid singing. And he actually didn't like his voice, from what I've heard. He put a lot of effects on it because he didn't like it.
Double track.
And for me, it's like I only understand how to kind of sing mostly one way, and that's finding the break in the voice. And then so every time, if you ask Jer, every time we record, we're always like, okay, here's the song. Now let's find the key, and we'll push it all the way up and down until we're getting the right amount of urgency and feeling out of the voice, and then we go backward from there. So it's like, it was fun watching that. And I also never realized how much I related to, I never, for the longest time, hated my voice. And also I had that kind of break sometimes. And I always wished I was more like that, those other kind of singers that can just do whatever they want to do. But as you get older, you start to realize, I kind of like that about myself, or these things that felt like,
it's what makes you you.
Yeah, these things that felt like disadvantages become strange advantages if you can figure out a way to harness it. But it's a funny thing that I've just been, even with music over the pandemic, you know, like there's so many songs that you wouldn't think people would be interested in or would want to hear when they're already sad. And then they go and they listen to sad music, and it makes them feel alive, makes them feel something, makes them feel connected because of that feeling. And I think that's the bizarre nature of music, is it's just so like, you can't think too much about it. It's more, and that's this album. This album is very much like Brightside is about letting go of that intellectual thing and just like more of a gut feeling, you know, more from her heart, which is like for us a new direction.
Relate to that when they hear something that they're going through or that they've been through. It's kind of like they have a certain empathy, and they can actually really vibe with it, because they've been there too. And then that's how you build a connection. And, you know, hearing a sad song for somebody could be, you know, the happiest thing in the world, you know, just because someone else feels the same way.
Yeah. There's some Charlie Brown cartoon that I think Jer had lying around, and it's like they're playing a sad record, and he says, what's the female character in that cartoon?
Lucy.
I can't remember. Lucy goes, that's such a sad song. And Charlie goes, I know, play it again. And it's like, that's what Jared and I have always been like. We have we have piles of sad songs. It's like really hard for us to write even something remotely happy sounding. And so it's like, but that's always been where like our interest was. So I think you know, what's a good music isn't always like a meritocracy or something as far as what becomes big and what doesn't, what becomes successful or well known. But I think a lot of what's reassuring about music is that there's all these artists that have found a way, and their music has found its way. And it's not always right away, but good music really has like this way of growing like a weed through concrete or something. It's just like it will find the sun, you know, and it will find its audience. And even being around U2 and talking to them a little bit about it, it was like they're just 4 friends that make music, and they have ambitions, but you wouldn't like write the songs that made them really big, most of them, especially in the beginning, just to be big. They were writing them because they were fascinated by these songs. There was like almost hymnals for them, and they were not this pop, you know, structure. And I think that's what's beautiful about a lot of this. Is just like you could sit around and you can try to intellectualize it, or you can try to plan stuff, but if it's true to you, people will probably understand that. And if it's not, they're probably going to get that too. And that will feel more slick and more LA produced kind of thing, as opposed to this like heartfelt thing that seems to have a place for a lot of, like, a reassuring amount of people will find it. Whereas when you first start out, it's a little daunting. You're like, how am I going to make it? No one cares.
Wes, before we go, Ben sent me something this morning. I want him to show you.
Oh yeah.
He designed vignettes to the album cover.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's your next solo album, bro.
Did you draw that?
Yeah, I just did it about an hour ago.
Dude,
Because we do these little thumbnails after
really
our
good,
podcast.
man. Holy shit.
Bro.
That's like really good. Wow.
Yeah, he's
I used
good.
to draw as a kid, and I have a really big appreciation for like anybody that can make human likenesses, like, you know, especially the person looking at it is like, yeah, that does look like me. There's no place. You get
I plastered your Twitter with it, man. So give it a like.
Oh, you send
Help
me
an
that.
old man out.
I'll put it on my Instagram or something, man. You just send me it.
Sweet as, man.
Hey, Wesley Shultz, Lumineers, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget, Brightside, available January 14th. Awesome,
Yeah.
dude.
Thank you guys so much. Great chatting.
Yeah, great chat.